To me, it is unimaginable that a parent would kick their kid out. And it happens not just to trans kids, but across the LGBTQ spectrum. When we look at homeless, the unhoused teenagers, 40% who are there, it's because they're part of the LGBTQ community and their parents kicked them out.
Where's the hate coming from, Joe? Trans people are humans. They're not monsters. They're not creatures.
I really believe that the anti-trans movement has been a creation of politics. When our son first started talking about being trans, it wasn't difficult at all to say, oh, okay, this is who our kid is. What do we need to do to help?
What advice do you have to families struggling to reconcile love and acceptance amid social backlash or legal restrictions against trans youth?
Well, thank you for asking that. I think...
Welcome to the BoricuaBC2 Show. I'm your host, Bill Cancel. We have a really, really incredible guest today. She got a little bit of bronchitis, but please be nice to her because she's recovering. A little bit about the background about our guest is that she was born in Newton, Massachusetts, moved to Mound Bayou, Mississippi in 1967, the only white Jewish student in junior high school, attended MIT, has a BS in civil engineering and Stanford MBA. She's also an author. The books that she's written are The Outskirts of Hope in 2015, Never a Girl, Always a Boy in 2020. There they go. Oh, we're going to talk about those books. Yeah. From a background on what she considers to be very important in life is civil rights, race, Jewish identity, transgender acceptance. As far as advocacy in boards, Equality Texas, ADL, CTX, Jelson, Texas. Again, her play, Always a Boy, debuted in 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, and I am so proud to say this, Miss Jo Ivesta. Welcome, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. Thank you for inviting me to join you for your podcast.
And like I said, I told the audience that you're a little bit under weather, so don't worry about it. We're going to definitely get through this all. Joe, let me just start off with, I don't know if this is a simple question or a complex question or whatnot, but, looking at your background, I suspect I could probably talk to you for at least 6 hours to cover everything. But with your background, the race and transgender rights and so on and so forth, where is your head at right now with what you're seeing happen in this country?
It's a great question. I appreciate that you're thinking about it and that you're listening. Yeah. I feel very much that we are losing ground, and I don't know how political you want to get, but
you go where you want to go, Joe. Don't worry about it.
Years ago, when I looked at trans rights, for example, I would have said that we are 20 years behind the larger lesbian and gay rights, gay marriage, law of the land, and everybody knows a gay couple, and it's just like, yeah, these are just people. And we're 20 years behind that with the transgender community. People either don't know someone trans or they don't know that they know someone who is trans. And when we don't know people, it's easier to be fearful, to other them. And so that's where we were a few years ago. Now we've gone way back. That now there is active discrimination against the trans community, and it's been very harmful. And I hope the pendulum is going to swing back fairly soon. The more extreme it gets, in some ways, the more hopeful I get that things are going to change more quickly. And I would say the same is true about racial relations.
Right.
That in many ways, it feels like we're fighting some of the same battles that we were fighting when I was a kid in the 1960s.
Which was 2 weeks ago, but go ahead.
First in the civil rights movement.
Right.
Some of the same things. So it's very disconcerting and disappointing, but individuals are fantastic. And I find even living in Texas, there are a lot of wonderfully supportive people who are positive. They may not speak up, but the acceptance of the community, whether it's racially related or LGBTQ related, it's there.
There's a really nice old-fashioned deli by my house that I go to every once in a while. And I stopped going because they were always running Fox, right? And, I know why, because the big blue-collar construction client base, right? So that kind of makes sense, right? So the other day I was in the neighborhood. I said, let me just stop inside and get a sandwich to eat. So I walked in, and a beautiful trans woman walked in the door. And I said, oh, my God, oh, holy hell was going to break loose, right? Because I was so pleasantly surprised, Joe, to see what I saw. the entire staff, and apparently she's a regular customer there. So the entire staff came out to greet her.
Nice.
The owner came out from behind the counter to go sit and have coffee with her and talk to her to see how she was doing and so on and so forth. So I share that because I think there's hope, Joe. But what I don't understand, and maybe you can shed some light on this, and unfortunately, I still haven't even followed my script of questions yet, but maybe you could shed some light on this, but where's the hate coming from, Joe? I mean, trans people are humans. They're not monsters. They're not creatures. They're humans. I just don't understand where does the hate come from?
I think it's a few things. I think it's easy to be afraid and hateful when we don't understand. That I think that's human nature.
Okay.
And this is subject matter that no one was really talking about until some politicians figured out that it was an issue that maybe they could get some votes on. I really believe that the anti-trans movement has been a creation of politics.
I agree.
That
No argument.
didn't feel that way before. They weren't thinking about it. They thought it was a very, very, if they did think, they thought it was a tiny percent of the population, that it didn't affect them, that they'd never come across someone who was trans. And so they weren't worried about who was going to be in the bathroom next to them. And then for purely political reasons, folks started making it an issue in a few places, and they were successful. They were winning elections based on trashing trans people. And once it started to happen in a few places, it took off nationally. And I think that's where the hate came from. It was manufactured. And once it started, it grew. And people pick on those who are wealthy, perhaps, maybe don't have a job, anybody that they can look at and say, they're different from me.
Right.
It's too easy to just assume the worst and not see what you saw in the deli of this is a person. And it sounds like it's a charming person who makes friends easily.
Yeah.
So that's why she was greeted friendly.
And keep me honest, Joe. What's the percentage? Is it like the percent of trans people in the country? It's like some ridiculously low number.
The number that the Williams Institute, which is part of the University of California Law School, which is the group that's kind of monitored percentages, has said it's around 0.6% of the total population. So that's less than 1%. In a school of 1,000 kids, that means there might be 6. If you're in a big high school with a couple thousand kids, there might be a dozen. And so it's not a very big portion of the population. It does look like, as we talk about it more, then more people are openly saying, oh yeah, that's me, I'm trans. So we're seeing in the younger generation, the numbers may be going up a little bit, but I don't think that's a change in the population. I think that's a change in the recognition of the terminology.
Interesting. Thank you for that clarification. Your memoir, Outskirts of Hope, recounts growing up as an only white student in an all-black Mississippi town. We have a little bit in common with that because I grew up as the only Puerto Rican in a white community and was the only Puerto Rican in a Catholic school for many years.
Mm.
So, interesting dynamic. How did that early experience shape your views on systemic injustices and privileges?
Sure. Well, first, let me just clarify a little bit. I wasn't the only white student in the family. I was the only white student at my junior high school.
Okay.
My brothers were there as well. I had two older brothers. One was at the Catholic school, even though we're Jewish, and
Right.
the other was at high school. So we were there, and there was one other white family that had been brought in to work where the dad was a doctor, and they were working at the same clinic. Their kids were younger. So I was the only middle school, junior high school age individual. I just wanted to correct that we weren't the only family.
Yeah.
Really just giving credit to the fact that there were others that were in there fighting and participating, as well as a handful of single people. It really influenced me a huge amount. It made me, in many ways, the person that I am. I think I go back to 3 things. One is awareness. If my dad had not moved our family to the Mississippi Delta, I would never have understood its existence. I would have read about it. I was an avid reader even as a 10-year-old kid, but I wouldn't have seen with my own eyes the poverty, the discrimination, the hope and the joy, the wonderful mix of people, the challenges that they faced. So it gave me a real awareness. The second thing it gave me, I'm stealing this line from my mother, was not be afraid.
Yeah.
Because difficult things happened to us while we were there, and we survived everything. It was, and the people around us met with challenges, were rising to those challenges. And so it was kind of, well, like, I dealt with all of that. I can tackle anything. My mom went on to work the next 25 years in schools that other teachers avoided. And so that was an impact for our whole family. The third thing is an awareness that we could make a difference. As I was working on the book, my editor very much encouraged me to go back to the town and interview people. Right. And I was hesitant to do so for a variety of reasons. One of them was a fear that the experience had been built up in my own family's mind, that we had been accepted, that we were appreciated, that we had done some good and been a part of something more important than ourselves. That was kind of what I grew up thinking about. And I didn't want that story to be damaged. I didn't want to find out either that we weren't welcome or that not appreciated or forgotten. And I got there and none of that happened. My mom's students spoke of her as one of their best teachers and that she influenced their lives. My dad's former patients and colleagues talked about what a difference his presence at the clinic had made for them. I learned that community had a higher percentage of Black PhDs in the medical fields than anywhere else in the country. So recognizing that one family, one person can really make a difference. So those three things: awareness, courage, and knowing I can make a difference.
How did that then translate? Everything you just said, how did that get translated or adopted? I'm not quite sure what word to use in writing the play Never Girl, Always a Boy.
100% transferable.
Right, yeah.
When our son first started talking about being trans, we were kind of the perfect family to be accepting. Variety of reasons. I'm blessed to be in an extended family where everybody is pretty darn accepting. But in particular for me and for my husband, because we had talked about it so much, it wasn't difficult at all to say, oh, okay, this is who our kid is. What do we need to do to help? It's still our kid. We clearly love him and want to support him. And we very soon realized how people were discriminating against trans individuals and said, okay, we have to be a part of the fight. And that's what led me to say, I got to write this book. So the book preceded the play. And it was with my son's permission. He could veto the project at any point. He helped me with writing it. He gave me video recordings that he had done as he was getting ready for conversations with various people and with a therapist. And he shared those with me, and those became the basis for his voice in the book. So it really was a family project. And the experience in Mississippi is what set me up to be able to do that. Having it then evolve into a play, that comes from my love of theater, my recognition how powerful a play can be. And my husband and I met in college theater. We were in an undergraduate repertory company together. My parents met in high school theater. My grandparents met in college theater. So it's in my family. I had acted at an amateur and college level, and had always wanted to come back to the stage. I just didn't know it was going to be as a writer. It was very natural and easy for me to say, this is something that belongs on stage.
You know, Joe, one of the things that gets me about this, definitely would love to hear your input on this. You know, I have twins, they're 30. If they came out tomorrow or said they were trans tomorrow, I would take the position that you took. You know, congratulations. Are you happy? What can I do to help? Right. And help them through this transition. But we hear so many times, Joe, of parents who will throw their children out, cast them aside, never speak to them again, so on and so forth. How does that happen? How do you look at your child and say, no, no, no? How does the child go to the parent and say, no, no, this is really who I am? And the parent says, no, you're not. You are who I say you are. How does that happen?
I have three responses. One is I don't
Please.
know how any parent can do
Right.
that. And to me, it is unimaginable that a parent would kick their kid out. And it happens not just to trans kids, but across the LGBTQ spectrum. When we look at homeless, the unhoused teenagers in our cities, 40% of the teenagers who are there, it's because they're part of the LGBTQ community and their parents kicked them out. So it's happening not just to trans kids, and it's horrible and incomprehensible to me. But I try to understand. And I think there are two things that are happening beyond what I can't understand. I think one is our religious communities have sometimes been extremely unaccepting. And so the family has believed what the formal religious structure has said and thinks that what their kid is doing is evil and they just have to not be a part of their lives. And that's heartbreaking. But I've talked with way too many young trans adults who have been thrown out of their homes, and it was because of their church. I think the other is closely related, that parents are viewing it as tough love. They don't believe that being trans is real. And so, or they think it's wrong. I mean, I've had here in Texas, we've had a politician coin the phrase that trans kids are the spawn of the devil. I don't think that politician believes it, but folks picked up on that phrase. And so they've, in the same way that parents have turned to conversion therapy for their kids, which has now been declared illegal and essentially torture in many of our states and in the some of the blue cities in the red states. In that same way, the parents are saying to their trans kids, I'd have to fix you, and if that means throwing you out, then that's what I'm going to do. In some ways, that's the hardest to deal with because they think that they are loving their kid.
How important, and before you answer this, I'll tell you a little story. How important is storytelling in shifting public views on empathy and policy towards these marginalized communities? And I'll tell you why I said that. A big theater fan here. I went to go see Kinky Boots. I'm sure you're familiar with Kinky Boots, right? I will not tell you how many times I saw Kinky Boots because that's a different show, a different discussion. But quite a few times, to the point that we knew the cast. When the cast took the stage, they'd wave at us and stuff like that. That's how many times we saw the show. I will never forget the day that I decided to take my father to go see it. And, my father's Catholic. He's, very much into supporting and very empathetic and so on and so forth. So he said to me, what's this show about? And I said, it's about drag queens.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, he bawled like a baby.
Oh, that's lovely.
He bawled in the beginning of the show. He bawled at the middle of the show. He bawled at intermission. He was trembling at the final ovation. And he said it's the best show he's ever seen in his life. And that it moved him. The other reason why I tell that story is I used to love to go see Kinky Boots and just kind of people watch the crowd, right? Does this guy belong here? Does that guy belong here? The big tough bearded guys with the tattoos and construction workers. Look at that. Are they going to really get this? Because the story of Kinky Boots is a brilliant story.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it simplistically, it's a brilliant story. And I can't tell you how many times I saw those guys, doing one of these, standing up for the standing ovation at the end of the show, walking out of the theater, charge, and so on and so forth. So it tells me that a lot of people care. But that's a perfect example of telling a story that lasted for so many years, that got so much attention to the LGBTQ community. And I believe that firmly in a positive way in New York. It absolutely did. Or around the world, it absolutely did. How does your storytelling help?
Storytelling is the most powerful way of communicating. It allows the listener to step outside of their stereotype attitude
Right.
and just become immersed in the story and relate to the characters or the real people that they're seeing and listening to. And so well done theater, I think, has the ability to move people in a way that nothing else does.
Kinky boots.
That's a great example.
Kinky boots.
And in fact, this is new. You wouldn't have picked it up from your research or preparation for interviewing me, but we're now working on taking the storyline and moving it to the big screen.
Oh, good.
So we've got a
Good timing.
and a director and a producer that we're talking with, and I'm hoping we'll start filming next year.
That's going to be spectacular. Sign me up for the opening. I'll be there.
And that's a way to reach even more people. I've got a wonderful co-writer who is more experienced in the film world, happens to be trans himself, and so is able to bring his lived experience into the storyline. So it's been in addition to my son, so that it's not just one trans coming of age story, but two of them kind of wound together. I absolutely believe in that power. And I think the example you raised of the individual that looks like they wouldn't understand, that matches our stereotypes, I find that time and again. That I have my own prejudices or assumptions about people based on the way they look. And then I get blown away by how welcoming and friendly and warm-hearted they are. And that's wonderful that at this point in my life, I'm still recognizing where I'm not thinking as well as I want to be, and I'm expanding.
I can't tell you how happy when I see that. And if you think about the reality of it, my prejudice was proven wrong. And I'm very happy to have my prejudices proven wrong time and time again. It also makes me wonder, back to the beginning of the show, where is this hate coming from? Because I keep seeing genuinely sincere people who don't hate the LGBTQ community. So it's funny. It's less than 1% of the population, but I suspect it's less than 0.6% of the population that actually hates them.
I think there's a higher percentage that believe what they're hearing over and over again on Vrac News or in the very conservative newspapers. And so I think that number's been inflated.
Right. I'm sure.
It's hateful.
So here's a question for you that I've been dying to ask a Texan. What strategies have you found most effective against sweeping anti-LGBTQ legislation, but specifically in Texas? Because I know lots of people in Texas, and they're great people. They're diehard blue resistors and so on and so forth. And I literally shed tears for these people because of the oppressive regime that they're under Texas. How do you cope with all that? I mean, that's a lot of balls to have in the air. It's not just like fighting for one thing. You got to fight up here, down here, to the side, to the left. How do you deal with that?
It's I would say the main thing is community.
Right.
That there is a fellowship of fellow advocates and community members that have found each other, and that's huge. We started up a chapter of PFLAG in our little town, which is about half an hour north of Boston. PFLAG, for listeners who don't know, the initials used to stand for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And a few years back, they said, that's not broad enough. We'll still keep the PFLAG name because people know it, but it's more general now. It's to support the LGBTQ community and those who love them. And it's a national organization with local chapters. Well, we formed one in our city, and people came out of the woodworks to be a part of it. We have monthly meetings where folks can come and share their stories. We've had people come out in these meetings, whether it's as gay or trans or non-binary or bisexual. It's been a really beautiful community activity. And in the same way, statewide, as the politicians have brought up these bills that are anti-trans, that either try to keep trans people out of the bathrooms or that make it illegal to be trans and say if you're trans, then that's fraudulent, and so you can go to jail or pay a $10,000 fine. Some really absurd bills have been proposed. Well, when there's a hearing before the legislative committee that has to hear it before it goes to the full legislature, word goes out and we show up and we testify. And we'll show up at 7:30 in the morning to sign up to testify. And sometimes we're still there at 3:00 the next morning waiting our turn. And that's how we've been fighting it, is that community. And Texas is so gerrymandered that
Yes.
politicians are not representing the people. The politicians are much, much more conservative on average than the population. So we're feeling supported. You know, when we show up, there will be a few people that are saying nasty things at the hearings, but mostly it's you come back into the audience from speaking and people are thanking you and congratulating you and saying thanks for sharing your story. And it's wonderful and it's uplifting, and that's how we've been fighting. And then going with that is all the material behind that, of the individual talks with legislators about how important this is. So folks will go door to door in the Capitol and just say, here's who I am. We're a family that happens to have a transgender family member. Ask us whatever you want. We'll tell you who we are. We're just people. And
Joe, Joe, does your heart tell you that things are starting to change in Texas?
not yet. The politicians with the power are still hell-bent on using this as an issue to try to get votes. So we just finished a legislative session. Fortunately, Texas only meets, its legislature only meets once every 2 years for a few months. So in between sessions, we get a break. We don't have to be fighting the bills. We just got through the session for 2025 thinking, okay, we're done. And the governor calls a special session. Big reason is to gerrymander the state even further, to try to come up with 5 new Republicans for Congress, so at the national level. And this is in coordination with the White House, this gerrymandering.
Right. Seen that, yeah.
Fighting. But they then threw in another bathroom bill. So in the midst of all this other stuff, where we've got the flooding to deal with, we've got our education system to deal with, instead they're gerrymandering and going after trans kids. It doesn't make sense. That's why I say I don't think we're there yet. The tide has not turned, and in surveys of the general population, we're not gaining ground because they're constantly hearing the politicians saying trans kids are dangerous or affirming healthcare is harmful, despite the fact that the vast, vast majority of members of the medical community say that transgender affirming care is life-saving.
Do you think there will come a time that Texas flips finally?
Yes.
Yeah. What advice do you have to families struggling to reconcile love and acceptance amid social backlash or legal restrictions against trans youth?
Where I connect with parents as a parent or with grandparents as a grandparent is to say, remember you love your kid or your grandkid and you want them to be happy. And we see so many examples of trans kids and adults, once they come out and are able to present to the world the way they feel inside, there's a huge amount of flourishing. and
Yeah.
happiness. And I know what parents want for their kids. So that's what I try to tap into, is to remind them that love is there.
What state or federal reforms do you believe are urgent, like need to be done today for protecting LGBTQ children and ensuring justices for all survivors of institutional discrimination?
Basically, if we could ratchet it back to where we were before the current administration, that would be step number one. That we had protection in the Department of Education, for example, that said trans kids can participate in sports. Teachers should observe the proper names and pronouns for trans kid that matches their gender identity. We had that you can't, with the Bostock decision at the Supreme Court, we had that you can't discriminate against someone at work just because they're trans. So in the same way that there's a long list of protected categories for civil rights activity, we had been successful at getting sexual orientation and gender identity included in those lists. And in many of the blue states, they are still there, even though it's at conflict now with the national government. In Texas, we don't have those protections. Some of the cities do, but then they can get in trouble with the state for enforcing non-discrimination, where the state can withhold money, not necessarily legally, but
Right.
we see the threat of that. We see it happening. So the first thing would be to roll back to where we were in 2024. The second thing is, I think that as a country we should be passing the equivalent of the Equality Act that basically would put it into law, and I think that would be huge, and I think everything else would come from that.
What advice can you give me, and I mean this sincerely, as a podcaster to help the trans community? Should I have them on the show? Should I do shows with them? What can I do to help with my platform?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I think, well, what you're doing already, I think is huge. Just getting the stories out, and I can speak as a parent and speak about a parent's love, but it would be great to hear from
Yeah.
individual experience, to
Yeah.
have some guests who are from within the trans community,
Yeah.
and that's so that your listeners and viewers can see that these are just people.
I've definitely tried. I've gotten a lot of parents of trans people to be on the show. I haven't gotten any bites from actual trans, and I'm saddened by that because I think the reason why is because they're just too nervous or too concerned to do it.
Well, I think
And I can't blame them, but I need to portray that this is a safe place.
yes,
This is not, and my followers are very much like me, so that it's a bigger safe place.
yeah.
So I would want them to hear their voices to see what's going on. Yeah.
I think that you're right. It's a time when it's hard to get trans voices because people are scared, especially if they're involving kids.
Right.
I mean,
Of course.
Texas, they can go after trying to take a kid away from a family and put them in foster care if they investigate and say, oh, this trans affirming care that these parents are providing, we're going to prove that as child abuse. And so we're going to take the child away and put them in a foster home, which is not a good system in Texas, probably not in most states.
Yeah.
There's a lawsuit that has an injunction against investigating families if they're part of PFLAG, but that's still a threat. And they went after the advocates. They went after when I say they, the state went after the individuals who had been standing up and speaking at the hearings and testifying. That's who they got first. And so people are afraid to speak. I think another piece of that is that it's already hard to live in this world if you're different.
Yes.
It's already taking a huge amount of effort, whether you're part of the community of color, whether you're part of the LGBTQ community. And so there's a sense of don't ask me to represent everybody. Don't ask me to get out there and speak. Please, as an advocate, as an ally, go out and do this. And I've had those conversations because I worry sometimes, am I the right person to be speaking? Because in some ways it would be better to hear from a community member. Then I think I'm giving the community members a break.
Right.
They don't have to be the one to do it. But if you look, there are community members with lived experience that aren't afraid. Either they're no longer kids, or they live in a safe space. Their whole community knows about them, and so there's no reveal. There's nothing to be lost that way, and they enjoy getting their story out. I mean, I know, for example, trans pastors. I would think that might be an avenue to pursue.
I have made a note that I'm going to go right after this call to my marketing company and say, find me those people.
I think that
I think that'd be real. So, Joe Ivester, I'm floored by this show. This was a phenomenal show. You were an absolutely incredible guest. But before you go, please take out those books and let everybody see those books.
Okay. So this is the one about my son. That's actually his picture.
Right.
Called Never a Girl, Always a Boy. And it's available wherever books are sold. It's also available in audiobook. And if you get the audiobook, you hear the actual family speaking. And it's written from everybody's perspective. So there's sections from me, there's sections from my husband, from our son, from siblings, from daughter-in-law. So we really present it as a family memoir. And then that came out in 2020. The Outskirts of Hope came out in 2015. And that's the story of when I was a 10-year-old kid in 1967, my dad moved us to Mississippi so he could open a clinic in an all-Black area. And it's primarily my mother's story. So it's mostly her voice. And every once in a while, this 10-year-old voice comes in and tells the story, maybe the same story, a little bit differently. And then coming back as a woman in my 50s at the time, with going back to the town and interviewing people and really kind of resolving some unresolved stuff. So
unbelievable.
Those are the two books.
Unbelievable. Today, I really hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did. Joe was an incredible catch, and truly honored for her to be on the show. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care, all. Bye-bye.